Have you ever gone through the checkout process and been asked to authenticate a payment? Chances are, yes, you have, alongside billions of other people. And we were lucky enough to be asked by Ipsos Mori to help them create a set of prototypes to test for EMV, the 3DS team for payment authentication. We worked on 80 prototypes and helped co-author the UX guidelines for 3DS. I'd love to show you our process and how we went about and did it. First things first, we have to choose what kind of prototype fidelity we want. As a little bit of a backstory, we've got 10 different payment authentication methods. That could be your OTP, where you get a code, to going through your bank app. So there's 10 different types of those in total. We'd also then need to test the different variations of those. You can quickly see how these prototypes can add up. And then to add that extra layer of complexity, we're testing in 5 different markets. At the end of the day, we're going to have something like 80 prototypes or more to manage. So that's a lot to take on, and something you should really consider when you're thinking about this at the very beginning of what you're doing. So how did we approach this? In the previous project, we used React. We probably had about 10 to 20 prototypes in the original project, and having that realness was really important because we were validating those flows for the very first time. So we wanted that kind of feeling of a real notification coming through. Being able to take your details all the way through and give that sense of realness and to get a real feeling of what the participant is thinking. However, this one is a little bit more nuanced. Now we're looking at maybe just small tweaks here and there, looking at the wording, looking at how we can lay things out. We wanted to be able to move quickly. So for that reason, React was out pretty quick because we wanted to be able to update things while we're testing, which left us either Figma or kind of one of these other ones, which are like Exure, Webflow, or Prototype. So they're a little bit more advanced prototyping tools compared to Figma. They've got more interactivity and they're better for those complex interactions. In the end, we went for Figma though, because it just had that kind of quick, agile approach that we really liked. And we were testing some new different payment authentications, and we figured we didn't want that complexity of interactivity with those other tools. We just wanted to all maintain in that one file where we could quickly move and get things going between sessions. Arguably, one of the more important parts of this project, for us at least, was the design system setup. We had to be quite smart with it because you can imagine when you're managing such a large amount of prototypes, then it can really get messy very quickly. So we needed to think of a smart way of organizing the instances and being able to quickly switch and maintain that flexibility and consistency while the project was going on. We did this using Figma variants, which were brilliant. This is the authentication pyramid. So after they've gone through the checkout, they go into that next step of authentication. You'll notice here we've got different props. We've got our header prop where we could switch out whether or not it was a notification or not, and then what stage that notification was in. And then we also had this kind of challenge screen here, which kind of covered all the different challenge sequences. So you can see here, we've got, this is a OTP one, and within OTP, we probably had different variants as well. So I can switch between them. And then also I can switch to different steps within that variant as well. So you can quickly see how you can build out a prototype super quick with this method. This was absolutely crucial for us, and really happy with the end result. To look at the mobile checkout, we also had an external bank app as well. And not only that, we also had to cover desktop as well. So you can imagine lots of different components, but enabling us to keep things super consistent and really easily update things without losing our mind, which was really important. So after we've done the design system setup, what we need to look at next is obviously building out the flows for the different authentication methods and their variations. So we decided to do each authentication method on their own page within Figma, and then have the variants within those pages. So you'll see here's an example of one. And to give a bit of context, it goes through the checkout flow. Now, along the way, there were some challenges, things like the notifications, making sure they come down correctly, timed correctly. We want to make this, even though we're going for the sort of simpler prototype, we do still want to maintain as much realness as possible. So after lots of hard work from ourselves and also the Ipsos team, it's test day. Ipsos are in charge of, they've been looking at the discussion guide and they'll be running the usability sessions. And our job on the day is to make any changes in between sessions and discuss what we're learning as we go. Ipsos have their own note taker who was using Airtable. We've used this in the past. We decided to opt for FigJam ourselves. And actually, I would say that between sessions, it was quite nice to having that kind of visual representation of the sticky note board rather than Airtable. However, you'll see that we've got all our different sticky notes and we've highlighted areas of interest, denoting from colours, green positive, red a critical usability issue, and then purples and pinks were highlighting areas we could potentially improve the prototype. So after each session, we'd have like a little recce and just discuss, and if we thought there was any changes. Based after this, we then make the updates, and then to help track those as we were going, which I would say is really important if you're making changes as you go, to have that kind of history of what's been done, is having the updates as you go along and saying what was there and what it's done and the reason behind it. We found that this was super helpful to Ipsos when it came to writing their report. A lot on the day happens. There's so much information coming in. It's good to have that kind of log of what is going on. So after testing, what we did was made any sort of design changes that we needed based off any kind of remaining feedback or insight that we had. And from there, we then now needed to consider the translations. So at that point, it wasn't all plain sailing. There had been a few technical challenges within the Figma file. We did find that sometimes it was acting a little bit slower, or there'd be some weird artifacts. We did get in touch with Figma themselves, and they did give us something to clear the cache and regenerate all instances, which did help. Other ways that we improved the prototype speed was making sure that all images had been compressed, and also making sure that there were no layers that were unnecessary. So we just simplified the prototype as much as possible. But as you can imagine, with anything like this, at this scale, it is going to be quite a heavy file, which led us to what we're going to do for the translations. So what we did was put it in a separate file for each translation. I think this was the right decision anyway. It kept things nice and simple, and there was a nice management system for all the different languages that we were covering. Translating, we used something called Cube Translator, which used AI machine learning, which got us about 80% of the way there. What's not quite there yet is that kind of cultural context and the nuance there. So what we did was we then exported that into an Excel sheet via Cube Translator. Now you have to imagine that the source text originally would have been English, but it would then populate it with all the French or whichever translation it was, which is great. And then they can highlight what has changed. So you'll notice in red is what changed originally. A lot of it didn't. It was just getting those kind of little nuances, and this was a lot quicker for people to scroll through and was way more efficient in order to get the translations back in as well. As you can imagine, after testing, there was so much data and so much insight. You don't want that to get lost in the ether. What we did was we built and helped co-author the 3DS UX guidelines of how payment authentication should be done. So hopefully a nice set of guidelines that people can go to, have a look at the different challenges and the best way that we've found works for people. On here we've got the screens for designers, but then also for a live prototype as well, which they can click through and see how it works in principle. We also then have a set of other high-level guidelines for what you should be doing throughout that process. Overall, this project has been really interesting to work on. It's had lots of different challenges along the way, but I think what's been really important is being able to have that kind of flexibility and having the well-structured design system when you're working at scale. The ability to rapidly iterate while on site with user feedback between sessions was invaluable. And so while Figma did have some technical limitations, I think it was the right choice for this particular study on the day. Thanks for watching. I hope it's been useful. If you have any questions about the design system or prototyping process, just let me know in the comments.